is a Sunday, our third day in Mexico City. We're taking the metro to the Zocalo, or the Central Plaza, and checking out some cool sights in the city center. The metro here is super affordable, just 5 pesos, about a quarter for each ride. It covers a huge area, so you can easily get to most attractions. We're staying in the Polanco area, which has its own metro station. We only need to make one transfer and take about 13 stops to reach Zocalo. The station is pretty clean and people are well organized. Just a heads up for the first timers. There is a designated area in the station for women and children, and the first few cars are for them only. So make sure not to accidentally wander into that section if you are not part of that group. So guess what happened? Our train didn't stop at the Zocalo station, and it turned out the station was closed. We must have missed an important announcement in Spanish during the ride because we noticed a bunch of people getting off at the previous stop. We had no choice but to get off at the next station instead. As we walked towards the city center, we could immediately tell that something was going on. We saw locals walking in groups, most of them wearing pink and some holding flags with slogans. The closer we got, the more we realized it was a pretty big deal. So we did a quick search online and found out that a massive protest was happening in Mexico later that day, with Mexico City being the main stage. It turns out that just a week ago, lawmakers voted to slash the budget of the National Electoral Institute, or INE, and cut its staffing. So these protesters were rallying against electoral reform and government's attempts to undermine the electoral authorities. The marchers were clad mostly in white and pink, the color of the National Electoral Institute, and they were chanting slogans like "Don't touch my vote." The current president, López Obrador, who finally got elected in July 2018 after failing twice before, has always been pretty critical of the INE, which is the group that oversees elections. Ever since his win in 2018, he has been pushing to reform the INE. In January this year, he accused this independent body of cheating, saying they ignored the stuffing of ballot box, falsification of election records, and vote buying. And 1 week before this protest, his proposals were passed. Once in effect, they would cut salaries, funding for the local election offices, and training for citizens who operate and oversee polling stations. They would also reduce sanctions for candidates who fail to report campaign spending. So it turns out that 500,000 people marched on the city's main plaza that day. Most of the places we planned to visit in the morning were closed. But honestly, we felt super lucky to witness a protest like this and learn more about the country's politics. We even had an opportunity to chat with a local who shared some different perspectives on the protest.
They are just kind of there is certain government departments. If they tell you have to go over there, if you don't go, you are out. If you have a cut,
Since most places were closed, we found out that museums were still open. So our first stop was the Palacio de Bellas Arts, also known as the Palace of Fine Arts. This cultural center in Mexico City hosts all sorts of events like music, dance, theater, opera, and literature. They also have temporary exhibitions featuring painting, sculpture, and photography. On the second floor, you will find the hall for these temporary exhibitions. Right now, they are featuring the work of Federico Silva, a Mexican painter and sculptor who played a key role in the development of art in Mexico during the 20th century. This exhibition marks a full circle for Silva. Back in 1945, he worked as Siqueiros' assistant on the mural Nueva Democracy for this museum. Today, the museum pays tribute to his incredible artistic journey and unique style. The third floor is dominated by a number of murals painted by most of the famous names of Mexican muralism. After exploring the museum, our appetites were calling, so we headed to the renowned taco joint, Los Cocuyos, which was featured by Lonely Planet. This spot is famous for its distinctive tacos. At the front of the restaurant, you will find the original window stand, where you can watch meats slowly simmering in a large pot and the owner skillfully chopping them for each other. There is always a queue outside, but you have the option to dine in the restaurant or grab a bite at the stand. The line moves quickly. We only waited about 10 minutes before being seated. They offer an array of cow meats, including eyeballs or ojos, brains or sesos, beef cheek, ear, tongue, and intestine. Essentially anything you can imagine. We ordered 5 different tacos to try a variety of meats: a tongue, an ear, a cheek, an intestine, and a gizzard. The tongue taco was a standout favorite. The thick slice of meat is lean yet incredibly tender. The meat's natural juiciness combined with the bold seasoning made it an unforgettable experience. Another one we really enjoyed was the intestine taco, featuring small chunks of overcooked intestine that provided a mix of crunchiness and smoky flavor. The crispy exterior contrasted with the tender inside, while the spices and charred notes added a complex depth to each bite. The remaining 3 tacos, ear, gizzard, and cheek, all tasted quite similar to us, to the point where we couldn't distinguish one from the other. They all had a soft, fatty texture with a subtle richness that was pleasant, but perhaps less memorable than the other 2. We suspected that they might have given us the same type of meat, especially since the gizzard should have had a different texture. Overall, this is a okay taco place. If you're in the city center, you may come to have a quick bite, but if the line is long, it's probably not worth the wait. After lunch, the protesters are mostly dispersed and the street is much less congested. So we decided to check out another museum before revisiting those spots that were closed due to protests in the morning. Museo Nacional de Arte, MUNAL, is the Mexican National Art Museum. It includes a large collection representing the history of Mexican art from the mid-16th century to the mid-20th century. As we stepped inside MUNAL, we immediately noticed the grand staircase and the breathtaking glass ceiling, which set the tone for the artistic journey ahead. With 3 floors filled with incredible works of art, there is so much to see and experience. MUNAL boasts a diverse collection of Mexican art, including pieces by renowned artists such as Diego Rivera, David Siqueiros, and Jose Orozco. Apart from its permanent collection, MUNAL also features rotating temporary exhibitions that showcase various aspects of Mexican art and culture. Directly across the street from MUNAL is the Postal Palace of Mexico City. This remarkable building showcases a blend of design elements and materials from Europe and Mexico. The palace contains ornaments of marble, plaster, and white stone. One of the most striking features of this post office is its grand central staircase, made of beautifully crafted iron and brass. As we look closely, we cannot help but admire the incredible craftsmanship and meticulous attention to detail. Fun fact, this building also inspired a scene in the popular Disney film Coco. Right outside the post office, you will find a vendor selling postcards that make perfect souvenirs and thoughtful mementos to send back home. We grabbed the postcard, purchased the stamp at the counter, and mailed it out, creating a memorable moment at this gorgeous spot. After our visit to the post office, we walked by a beautiful cafe called Cafe Tacuba and decided to stop for a break. To our surprise, we found out that this restaurant is actually one of the oldest in Mexico City, with over 100 years of history. Set in a charming colonial-era building, we decided to order some desserts and drinks. The atmosphere was made even more enjoyable with a live mariachi band playing delightful music as they moved from table to table. As the late afternoon approached, we realized that we didn't have enough time to visit more attractions, so we decided to simply stroll through the Central Historic District. This area feels completely different compared to the morning when the streets were closed off and filled with protesters. Now the city center has returned to its usual vibrant atmosphere. The Central Historic area is brimming with stunning architecture, lively plazas, and fascinating history at every turn. We will come back to the city center another day to further experience the heart and soul of the city. We wrapped up our amazing day with a delightful dinner at the elegant Rosa Negra restaurant, and then followed by some fabulous drinks at the famous Limantour bar. On day 4, we joined a guided tour to check out the amazing Teotihuacan, one of Mexico's most famous archaeological sites. It's about 30 miles north of Mexico City, and we got there in less than 1 hour by car. Since it's late February, early spring, we saw blossoms all around. The ancient Mexicans used them to keep track of the seasons for growing crops. Oh, and we also spotted a bunch of super chill dogs just hanging out on site. They're so cool. Teotihuacan, founded around 100 BC, was once a massive urban hub to the ancient Mesoamerican world. At its peak, it was home to over 100,000 people. Though we are not quite sure who the original builders were, this amazing city has connections to various civilizations like the Toltecs and the Aztecs. Teotihuacan translates to the place where the gods were created. This amazing site and its surrounding valley provide a unique glimpse into the pre-urban structures of ancient Mexico. Our first stop is the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, also known as the Temple of Feathered Serpent. It is the third largest pyramid at Teotihuacan. This structure is notable partly due to the discovery in the 1980s of more than 100 possibly sacrificial victims found buried underneath the structure. We had the chance to climb onto the platform next by the temple and got a close look at the temple. The pyramid takes its name from the representation of the Mesoamerican's feathered serpent deity, which covered its sides. People started living in the Teotihuacan Valley before the Christian era, but it was between the 1st and 7th centuries AD that the city really grew into one of the largest ancient cities in the Americas, with a population of at least 25,000. At its peak, the city covered an area of 36 square kilometers. Beyond the massive ceremonial center, which makes up just 10% of the total area, Excavations have uncovered palaces and residential areas that are super interesting. Sadly, the city was destroyed by fire and later abandoned in the 7th century due to internal conflicts. Next, we walked over to the Avenue of the Dead, the main road in the city that stretches for more than 2.5 miles. All of Teotihuacan's major monuments are connected to this central avenue. It is called the Avenue of the Dead because it was thought to be lined with tombs. This impressive street used to be filled with lively markets, grand palaces, and towering temples, giving us a peek into the thriving life that existed here back in the day. The ethnicity of the inhabitants of Teotihuacan is subject to debate. Therefore, Teotihuacan is the name used to refer to both the civilization and the capital city of these people. Artifacts found in the city and sites across Mexico suggest Teotihuacan was a wealthy trade metropolis in its prime. The art and architecture styles of Teotihuacan are found widely throughout Mesoamerica, suggesting the city had far-reaching influence. The city contains several large important structures: the Pyramid of the Sun, the Pyramid of the Moon, and the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, or the Feathered Serpent. At the north end of the city is the Pyramid of the Moon, dedicated to Moon God in the form of winged serpent, which gives life and fertility. That is a focal point for ceremonies related to fertility and water. It was also a burial ground for sacrificial victims. East of the Avenue of the Dead is the Pyramid of the Sun, the third largest pyramid in the world. Standing at 216 feet tall, this awe-inspiring structure was dedicated to the sun god and played a central role in Teotihuacan's religious ceremonies. In the ancient times, people would gather here for rituals, offerings, and celebrations. After our visit to the archaeology site, we were invited to our guide's house. Our guide is a Teotihuacan local, and his home is just a quick 10-minute drive from the site. The village is filled with agave and cactus plantations.
I'm gonna wash my hands. In just a few minutes, I'm gonna show you how to do chocolate. How do the ancient people like Olmecs, Mayans used to do their own chocolate just using cacao beans. Cacao fruit is different than cocoa. Cocoa is a different thing. I will explain you about it. You can see the tree hanging. There is a cacao fruit hanging from the tree, and it looks yellow like a papaya. That's when the cacao is ready. So we have to cut it, open it, and squish it out, and get the beans. The beans are like this, raw. When this is the color it gets when it dries, orange like almonds. If you see these beans in the supermarket, you can think these are almonds. What we have to do with the cacao is roast it in the clay pots. We have clay pots in there. We will put some charcoal, no fire directly. You can burn it like coffee. Yeah. It's similar as coffee. I roast coffee beans. I roast cacao beans in a tank on the back side of the house. So when they roast, they turn brown like this ones. You see them? Mm-hmm. Actually, these are warm. Oh my god. Oh my god, you're lucky. Why? Because my wife just roasts beans. Check this out. You see this?
Oh, really? Wow.
Careful, they're hot. Take one or two.
Mm. Mm. Chocolate. Mm.
Three flavors. Let me tell you, almond, hazelnut, and peanuts. Cacahuate, almendra y avellana. 3 sabores van a agarrar. 23 years. Okay, I'm going to show you, pay attention, how the Mayans and the Olmecs used to do chocolate in the jungle. Look. This is the ancient blender. You're gonna get the smells in a minute about the chocolate.
Wow.
How much to put for blender?
This is pure chocolate.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Cacao. How many ingredients to do chocolate? Just one. Pure. 100%.
We also tasted some delicious cacao drinks. And even tried some mezcal.
Let's share one.
Oh, and we also got to pet some adorable Mexican hairless dogs. In ancient times, those dogs were often sacrificed and then buried with their owners to act as guides to the soul on its journey to the underworld. They have been found in burial sites of both the Maya and Toltec. Our guide also took us to a cave in a nearby village. The cave is about 40 meters long and is part of a man-made tunnels that stretch underneath a large part of the ancient site.
You good?
We learned that the ancient people used rocks carved from these caves and transported them through the tunnels to build the pyramids and the temples we had just visited.
Then that's another way.
They have even found human skeletons in these caves.
2 weeks ago, still fresh. He was asking lots of questions.
You mean skull? Skull?
In front of the skull, you can see 2 more jaws. Can you see them?
Yeah.
You already know why. In the old times, this is the way they capture and conquer villages, chopping heads down, hanging their jaws as trophies. Tell me, do you guys can see the baby skull?
Yeah, that's
It's in the middle. Remember when I said dogs and babies that were offered besides the guys to guide them to the underworld? Remember that? You're watching one. This is from 2,000 years ago, I'm telling you. This guy, they found him in the road, just put him beside. They offer some eagle wings, and the flowers in the eagle wings are new, but because someone respects.
There are more.
After a jam-packed day filled with activities, exploring the culture and history, we headed back to Mexico City. See how busy the metro can be during the rush hour. There is no better way to end our day than with some tacos. So we headed over to Taqueria El Vilsito to try some of their famous tacos de pastor, said to be among the best in Mexico City. The tacos were delicious. They had a slightly different style of pastor than what we had before, a bit on the dry side, with super crispy meat that required some extra chewing, but the flavor was spot on, so we absolutely loved it. This place is clearly a local favorite, with just a few standing tables by the streets. Lots of people swing by for a quick bite on their way home after work, and they even share the salsa station. What a fantastic and authentic experience.